steroids and other drugs were also involved. Details in a bit. But first, I'll spend a minute with Minnesota Congressman Ellison. He was speaking to a group of atheists recently, which, you know, is a party I'd like to attend, when he apparently decided to spice things up a bit by comparing September 11th to the burning of the Reichstag building in Nazi Germany. Quoting, "After the Reichstag was burned, they blamed the communists for it and put the leader of that country, Hitler, in position where he could basically have authority to do whatever he wanted. The fact is, I'm not saying September 11th was a U.S. plan or anything like that. You know, that's how they put you in the nutball box," end quote. Let me translate that for you. Congressman Ellison is saying that the Bush administration had anything to do with 9/11. He's not saying that, but he's not saying that either. While I believe you not only have the right, but the responsibility to be critical of our government, there is a limit. In Mr. Ellison's case, that limit became clear the day he was elected the first Muslim in Congress, with polls showing that only 40% of U.S. Muslims believe that Arabs were really behind 9/11. It's absolutely irresponsible for someone in his position to even remotely insinuate that the government had any role in the attacks. And this is where the media has gotten this story wrong. It's because of who he is and who he represents. Congressman Ellison's words carry far greater importance than people like Rosie O'Donnell or Charlie Sheen or anybody else that thinks the government might have been involved. He, and maybe he alone at this time, has the power to unite or divide. And in this case, unfortunately, I believe he's taken the wrong path. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, he is a former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander and the chairman of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Zuhdi, we contacted Congressman Ellison and asked him to be on part of the program, but he said he has already responded to this in a remark to the Star Tribune. He said, quote, "Unfortunately, some have tried to misconstrue my remarks. Obviously, Osama bin Laden and the hijackers who carried out the murderous events are responsible for 9/11. The question is, how do we respond to this tragedy? With fear and rage or with courage and reason? I'm for courage and reason." Well, so am I. What is your problem with this, Zuhdi?
Well, my problem is, you know, here you have a congressman who, even at the time he was just congressman-elect, was going to the Imam Federation of America giving speeches about Muslim leadership. He then went to Dearborn, Michigan and spoke to the Muslim American Society and the Islamic Circle of North America, organizations with direct connections to the Muslim Brotherhood and Wahhabi interests and Deobandi interests, and yet he is not somebody who is not shy about his faith. He wears his Islamic identity on his sleeve and has rushed to Islamist organizations to speak to them, and actually was funded by some private donors who are leadership of CARE. So here you have somebody who's stepping forward. Just last week, actually, 3 days after he made that statement, he spoke to a youth summit that the Muslim Public Affairs Council organized, trying to teach Muslim youth about how they should be more engaged and more politically active.
Well, I don't think well, hang on just a second. There's not a problem. Look, you want to speak to people here in the United States and speak to these organizations. I don't have a problem with you speaking to these organizations. I don't have a problem with anybody saying that Muslims should be more involved in politics. They should be more involved in politics. My problem is that when he gave this example and he said that they weren't responsible for 9/11, the government wasn't responsible, which I thought was a little shady in his actual speech. But you know, hey, we can all say stupid things off the top of our head. What was the problem with it is he said they then blamed the communists. What is the comparison to the Reichstag? How is it that Bush is compared to the Reichstag? It doesn't make any sense when you try to dissect it.
You're exactly right. I mean, this is the part, is that he wants to connect somehow viscerally Hitler and dictatorship to the Bush administration and what we're doing, trying to free 50 million Muslims in Iraq and trying to propagandize almost like a soundbite out of Al Jazeera. And if he doesn't, the part that's so irresponsible, Glenn, is the fact that he doesn't see that what the terrorists use, the way Islamism works in its political collectivism, is to demonize the enemy. And the part that he needs to understand is that we've concluded that there's a direct correlation between political Islam or Islamism as a political ideology, whether you condemn terror or not. There's a correlation between that and radicalism. And you take somebody who is an icon of Muslims in America right now, whether he likes it or not, and actually it's a role he's accepting very willfully, So he takes that role, and then he makes these flippant statements that he then dismisses as being poorly chosen and almost like a Rosie O'Donnell statement, and yet doesn't see that there could be a youth who he was just speaking to that would use that and emulate that and say, wait a minute, our administration may be like the Hitler's Third Reich, and all of a sudden you have a 16-year-old legitimizing terror. And until he starts to understand that he has a obligation to take on political Islam directly, to take on Muslim Brotherhood, etc., he is not going to have any impact.
Zuhdi, it is good to hear the voice of Muslims like you on national television. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, it has been nearly